My name is Elizabeth Martin, 30 years old. I was clearing plates at my mom's Christmas party, balancing dishes while the hum of conversation and clinking glasses filled the air. The scent of roasted pine mingled with baked ham and cinnamon, a holiday symphony I had always tried to find comfort in despite the chaos of our blended family. That calm shattered when my stepfather's voice cut across the room, sharp as glass. "The maid doesn't need to stand here. Get back to the kitchen." He pointed directly at me, his smirk daring anyone to challenge him. The room froze. Some guests tittered nervously, others looked away, pretending they hadn't heard. But I didn't flinch. My hands gripped the plates tighter, and a fire ignited in my chest. This was not shame, it was resolve. I had spent my life learning how to survive, to stretch every dollar in our cramped Tennessee home, to keep my mother afloat after my father passed when I was 7. Cooking had been my tether, each stir of sugar and whisk of eggs a way to hold on to him. Mom, Susan, worked herself raw in her sewing shop, threading dreams into dresses while I helped fold, hem, and sweep. We weren't rich, but we had each other. That bond had always been my strength, my quiet rebellion against life's unfairness. Then Richard Bennett arrived, a media executive from Chicago with a big smile, bigger ego, and an even bigger sense of entitlement. He married my mom when I was 16, bringing along his daughter Jennifer, whose eyes always seemed to measure me like I was dirt beneath designer shoes. Richard promised stability, but what he delivered was condescension wrapped in charm. He barked orders like I was his personal assistant. Fetch his coffee, carry his coat, tidy the house. Jennifer watched, amused, her phone always in hand, her smirk an echo of his authority. And Mom looked at him, then at me, her silence sharper than any words. I swallowed my frustration then, just as I had learned to do since childhood. That Christmas night, the culmination of years of small humiliations, erupted in one cruel sentence. As I stacked dishes by the sink, Richard's voice rang out like a bell of judgment. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not embarrassment, but the heat of suppressed fury. Years of me trying to prove myself, of juggling 3 jobs, surviving on 4 hours of sleep while coding late at night, all of it distilled into that moment. I set the plates down slowly, deliberately, my eyes locking onto his. "I'm not your maid, Richard," I said, my voice steady. Silence hung like smoke. He waved it off, forcing a laugh to ease the tension. But I didn't need the audience to acknowledge me. I had finally said it for myself. The cold Chicago night greeted me as I walked to my car, but my heart wasn't heavy. It was alive with purpose. I called Lisa Morgan, my college roommate and closest friend, who had seen me through every late-night coding binge and low-paying freelance job. "I'm done playing small," I told her. "I'm starting my own company, and I'm taking him down." Her laugh was a mix of encouragement and disbelief. "Finally, Elizabeth, let's make this happen." Back in my tiny Chicago apartment, the glow of my laptop illuminated a resolve that had been years in the making. Mitchell Analytics, my idea for a personalized ad platform, began to take shape. Not just code, but a plan, a strategy, a weapon to reclaim everything that Richard thought he could diminish in me. I worked through the night, the hum of the computer echoing my heartbeat. Each line of code, each late-night note, was a brick in the foundation of something bigger. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every time my mother had looked away, for every slight Jennifer had flung at me, for every casual humiliation Richard had inflicted as if it were a joke. I didn't cry that night. I planned. And in the quiet of my apartment, I realized something profound. The girl who had once scrambled to survive in Tennessee had become a woman who could rewrite the rules of the world she had been forced into. The snow fell softly outside, but inside, a revolution had begun. Elizabeth Martin's resolve didn't fade with the morning light. It sharpened. She poured herself a cup of bitter coffee, her small Chicago apartment still faintly scented with pine from last night's Christmas chaos. The world outside was waking up, but inside, Elizabeth was already several steps ahead, her fingers dancing over her laptop keys as Mitchell Analytics began to take form. Years of frustration, humiliation, and quiet determination funneled into every line of code. She had sketched the platform in late-night sessions, fueled by coffee and a gnawing need to prove herself. Now she was transforming those sketches into a tangible product capable of revolutionizing the ad tech world. Lisa Morgan, her loyal roommate and co-conspirator, joined via video call. "Elizabeth, if this works, we're not just surviving, we're taking the game to them," she said, her tone a mix of excitement and disbelief. "We're not playing small anymore," Elizabeth replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Every client we get, every campaign we optimize, it's a step closer to showing Richard he underestimated me." Lisa's laughter echoed through the tiny apartment. "Finally, the Elizabeth Martin I know, not the girl who bends under his orders." Elizabeth smiled faintly, though her eyes were tired. She remembered every dinner where Richard paraded his success, twisting her words to make her seem small, while Jennifer snickered, a smirk plastered across her designer-perfect face. She remembered the sting of being ignored, of Mom's silent discomfort, of each order barked at her as though she were invisible. All of it had been fuel. Days blurred into nights. Elizabeth coded relentlessly, testing algorithms and refining data models. She reached out to small local businesses offering early access to her platform. Initial skepticism met her persistence, and soon her first few clients were signing on, drawn by the promise of precision targeting and real-time ad optimization. Then came the breakthrough, a tech conference in downtown Chicago. Elizabeth felt like a small-town girl lost in a jungle of suits, polished pitches, and million-dollar smiles. Her nerves screamed that she didn't belong here, but she forced herself forward, clutching her pitch deck like a lifeline. It was there she met Karen Walsh. At 50, Karen commanded attention without trying. Her reputation as a venture capitalist preceded her. Her sharp eyes seemed to cut through pretension and bullshit alike. After her panel, Elizabeth approached, heart hammering. "I have a platform that could disrupt ad tech," she said, handing over her business card. Karen studied her for a long moment, then slipped the card into her pocket. "Send me your deck." 2 days later, the reply came. Karen wanted to meet. Elizabeth felt a thrill of disbelief. This was the opening she had needed, the first step in turning her quiet rebellion into something tangible, unstoppable. At a downtown cafe, over cups of bitter espresso, Elizabeth laid out her vision. Mitchell Analytics could handle massive ad campaigns, personalize content in real time, and deliver measurable results that even corporate giants like Richard's Bennett Media Solutions would envy. Karen's questions were sharp, almost surgical, slicing through optimism to reveal real numbers, server costs, revenue streams. But she didn't dismiss Elizabeth. She saw potential, a spark that had been years in the making. "You're onto something, Elizabeth," Karen said finally. "But you're playing too safe. You could scale this bigger than the companies that are making headlines." "I want huge," Elizabeth replied, her eyes meeting Karen's without hesitation. "I want the kind of success that makes them notice me." Karen smiled faintly, approvingly. She promised introductions, investor networks, and mentorship. And true to her word, over the following months, Elizabeth's vision expanded into reality. Lisa helped refine the marketing, and Mark Evans, a brilliant young data scientist, joined to optimize the platform. Each new client, each data point, each late-night coding session felt like a brick in the wall Elizabeth was building against Richard's condescending empire. Elizabeth kept her distance from her mother's condo, resisting the urge to be drawn back into Richard's control. Mom called sometimes, her voice soft and worried. But Elizabeth's reply was always the same. "I'm swamped, Mom. New project." Half-truths, but necessary to protect her focus. Lisa noticed the tension behind her calm exterior one evening. "You're not just building this for you," she said, passing a cold beer across the desk. "You're doing it for your mom, too. To show her you're more than what he says." Elizabeth nodded, the weight of years pressing against her chest. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation, about rewriting the story she'd been forced into since childhood. Then came the unexpected break. A tech journalist named Rebecca Hall approached Elizabeth at another meetup. She had been investigating Bennett Media Solutions and handed Elizabeth a USB drive filled with financial reports, internal emails, and documents that revealed a company teetering on collapse. Elizabeth's pulse raced. Richard's $70 million empire was not the unshakable fortress he made it out to be. This wasn't just validation, it was opportunity. She called Karen immediately. "We could buy it," she whispered, adrenaline coursing. "We could own it." Karen didn't flinch. She asked questions, dug into numbers, analyzed risk. By the end of the conversation, a plan began to form. a shell company, Phoenix Partners, and a deal that could put Elizabeth in control of the very empire that had belittled her for decades. Elizabeth's quiet nights in Chicago had transformed into calculated steps toward taking back her power. Each line of code, each client signed, each strategic move was part of a plan months in the making. And soon, Richard Bennett would learn exactly what happens when you underestimate Elizabeth Martin. Elizabeth Martin had spent months building her quiet army: Mitchell Analytics, Lisa's marketing genius, Mark's coding wizardry, and Karen Walsh's connections. Each late night, every small win, every strategy session brought her closer to the moment she had been envisioning since that humiliating Christmas night. The day to strike had finally arrived. Phoenix Partners, the shell company Karen had advised, was ready. Elizabeth's name remained hidden in the filings, leaving her free to observe Richard's world without tipping him off. The acquisition papers, meticulously structured, transferred majority ownership of Bennett Media Solutions to Phoenix Partners, giving Elizabeth operational control and the strategic upper hand. Walking into Bennett Media Solutions' boardroom felt surreal. The walls of glass and steel seemed to tower over her, a monument to Richard's ego and years of condescension. The same man who had dismissed her, humiliated her, and forced her into the background now sat at the head of the table, oblivious to the storm approaching. "Elizabeth?" Richard's voice carried that sharp edge, the one that had made her shrink for years. "This is a closed session. What are you doing here?" A calm smile spread across her face as she set her laptop on the table. "I'm here on behalf of Phoenix Partners," she said, her voice steady, "the new majority owner of Bennett Media Solutions." Silence fell like a hammer. Pens froze mid-scribble. Eyes darted between her and Richard. The flush of disbelief spread across his face as he stammered, "That's impossible. Who authorized this?" Elizabeth slid the stack of signed acquisition documents across the table. "It's done. As of yesterday, Phoenix Partners holds 51% of the shares." Jennifer, sitting beside Richard, snorted derisively. "What, Elizabeth? Running lemonade stands now?" Her voice didn't waver. "Mitchell Analytics, my platform, has already secured contracts with major brands to replace failing campaigns," she said, clicking to a slide showing data, metrics, growth charts, and projected revenue. "We've saved the company from the $10 million losses you tried to hide." Richard's face darkened, veins visible on his temple. "This is a stunt. You don't have the experience or capital. Who's really behind this?" Elizabeth leaned back slightly, her calm deliberate. "Read the documents. Phoenix Partners is my partnership with Karen Walsh, a venture capitalist with a proven track record funding companies worth over $1 billion. She believed in me, and now, so does this company." Karen's name landed like a shockwave. Richard's pride faltered. Even Jennifer's smirk vanished, her eyes wide with disbelief. The board murmured, some in awe, others exchanging incredulous glances. "You're delusional," Jennifer spat. "Dad built this company. You're just a glorified coder playing dress-up." Elizabeth's gaze sharpened. "Your father lost $10 million hiding bad deals. My platform has already pulled in clients you couldn't keep. Check the numbers." She displayed the graph of major contracts, revenue, and projections. Jennifer's mouth opened, then closed, her face flushing crimson as she realized she had nothing to counter. The board chair, Ellen, a poised woman with an air of authority, nodded. "Ms. Martin, you're assuming operational control?" "Yes," Elizabeth replied, projecting her vision for the company: streamlined campaigns, improved staff retention, and a culture of respect. "Richard will report to me directly, effective immediately." A ripple of gasps spread through the room. Richard's hands clenched, his jaw tight, but he remained seated, stunned. When the meeting ended, the board members filtered out, some shaking her hand, others whispering about the bold new leadership. Jennifer stormed out, muttering insults, while Richard stayed behind, staring at the table as though it had personally betrayed him. Elizabeth packed up her laptop when Susan appeared, her mother's eyes wide, glistening with tears. "Elizabeth, how did this happen? Why didn't you tell me?" Her chest ached, remembering all the years of silence and fear. "I tried to tell you, Mom. But for years you didn't stand up to him. I had to do this myself." Susan's lips trembled as she reached for her daughter, but Elizabeth gently stepped back. "I'm sorry, but I can't keep pretending it's okay anymore." Richard finally stood, his voice low and menacing. "You think you've won? This company is my legacy. You'll crash it in a year." Elizabeth held his gaze, chin high, unflinching. "Your legacy was failing. I'm saving it. You'll follow my rules or find another job." His shoulders slumped. A man stripped of control, his power diminished, but his paycheck intact. Elizabeth exhaled, the weight of years lifting, replaced by a fire she hadn't felt in decades. Later, in her apartment, Elizabeth, Lisa, and Mark toasted quietly, laughing at the audacity of it all. The takedown of the century, as Lisa called it, had been executed flawlessly, but Elizabeth's mind was already racing ahead. New hires, restructuring, strategic plans, and policies that finally reflected respect, fairness, and competence. Karen called that night, her voice warm with pride. "You didn't just win, Elizabeth. You changed the game. Ready for phase 2? Elizabeth gazed out at the Chicago skyline, her heart steady, a fierce smile forming. "Born ready," she said. After the boardroom confrontation, the world felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. Lighter because Richard's grip was broken, his smirk no longer a chain around my confidence. He no longer controlled my story. Heavier because now I had to build something lasting, a life and a company I could be proud of without letting the bitterness consume me. Seattle called to me like a promise. The gray skies and misty mornings mirrored the clarity I craved. A new city, a fresh start, a headquarters for Mitchell Analytics that belonged entirely to me. I packed my apartment in Chicago, careful to leave behind the lingering shadows of Richard's empire, while taking every scrap of knowledge, skill, and determination I had nurtured in secret. Lisa insisted on coming along, her laughter filling the moving van as we navigated the rain-slicked streets toward the Pacific Northwest. The loft I found overlooking Puget Sound became a sanctuary. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, dancing across walls lined with books and art I had chosen, not inherited. For the first time, I wasn't a stepdaughter, a maid, or a nobody. I was Elizabeth Martin, the woman who had turned humiliation into power. Mitchell Analytics thrived in Seattle. The office buzzed with energy, Lisa orchestrating marketing campaigns, Mark fine-tuning algorithms, and Karen guiding me through high-stakes negotiations over video calls. Together, we transformed a small, scrappy platform into a company pulling in $2 million in revenue, serving 20 million ad impressions daily. Every contract we signed, every milestone, was a step further from the shadow of my past. I still thought about Richard, of course, but the encounters were brief and controlled. During my quarterly visits to Chicago, he greeted me with clipped, professional politeness, a subtle acknowledgement of my authority. "Good morning, Miss Martin," he would say, forcing his eyes away from mine. I could feel the tension in his posture, the restraint in his voice, but there was no satisfaction in gloating. These moments were quiet reminders of how far I'd come, of the resilience I had cultivated while scraping by in Tennessee and Chicago. Susan called occasionally, her voice wavering with both pride and guilt. Letters arrived, handwritten and hesitant, apologizing for years of silence, for not standing up to Richard. I read them late at night, my heart a mix of warmth and pain. I didn't reply immediately. My love for her remained, but her silence had left scars that needed time to heal. I realized I could forgive without rushing back into the past. Jennifer faded from my life as the months passed. Her attempts at contact, venomous emails, sarcastic comments about the business were met with polite indifference. I no longer needed her validation or confrontation. The girl who once smirked at my thrift store jacket was irrelevant to the woman I had become. Seattle became a crucible for reinvention. Lisa and I hiked the mountains on weekends, our laughter echoing through the pines, each step away from Chicago and its memories a meditation on freedom. Mark visited monthly, delivering Chicago pizza and bad jokes, grounding me with familiar camaraderie. Karen remained a guiding force, her sharp mind pushing me to think bigger, to innovate fearlessly. "You're not done yet," she said, her tone firm but encouraging. The Mitchell Foundation emerged from this momentum, a nonprofit dedicated to funding first-generation entrepreneurs, especially women from small towns like mine. We awarded $100,000 to 10 startups in our first year, reminding me of my own journey, the teenage girl threading needles, juggling jobs, dreaming of more. At our inaugural gala, standing in the spotlight, I shared my story, how humiliation had forged resilience, how grit had built opportunity, and how one could claim their worth without asking permission. The crowd's applause was more than validation. It was a celebration of perseverance, of fighting for a place at the table. Richard's world continued to shrink. Rebecca Hull's expose on Bennett Media Solutions hinted at mismanagement, though my involvement remained secret. His calls, tight with frustration, no longer scared me. "You're destroying my reputation," he said once. I laughed freely, a sound unburdened by fear. "You did that yourself," I replied. "I just saved your company." Seattle became home in ways Chicago never could. My loft reflected my identity, open, creative, unencumbered by others' expectations. I reveled in the small joys, weekend hikes, late-night coding sessions with Lisa, strategy calls with Karen, and visits from Mark. Every decision reinforced the life I had fought for, one built on merit, vision, and determination. Through Mitchell Analytics, I reshaped the ad tech industry without losing my principles. Contracts, hires, and innovations flowed in tandem with policies I had created: respect, fair promotion, and empowerment. Richard remained on staff, his role diminished but functional, a living reminder of what I had overcome. Every morning greeting he offered was no longer a source of bitterness, but a symbol of accomplishment, proof that strength and resilience could redefine legacy. I had built my family from choice, not obligation. Lisa, Mark, Karen, all people who valued me for my abilities and my character. The past had taught me lessons of patience, cunning, and courage, but it did not define me. The girl from Tennessee who had scrubbed floors and threaded needles was no longer invisible. She had transformed into a leader, a mentor, and a visionary. Standing on the stage of the Mitchell Foundation Gala, looking over the crowd of young, determined entrepreneurs, I realized the ultimate power was not in taking Richard's empire or commanding respect. It was in creating something lasting, meaningful, and mine. A legacy untainted by fear, manipulation, or silence. Elizabeth Martin had rewritten her story, not for revenge, not for validation, but for freedom, agency, and purpose. And with each step forward, Seattle became not just a city, but a testament to resilience, to transformation, and to the limitless potential that came from claiming one's own worth. Months after establishing myself in Seattle, a quieter but deeper conflict emerged, one that no amount of business success could erase, reconciling with my family and my own heart. The victories over Richard had been exhilarating, yes, but they were external. Inside, there was still tension. Memories of silence, shame, and missed moments with Mom and even Jennifer. Susan reached out again, her letters more heartfelt this time. "I'm sorry for not standing up sooner. I've been proud of you all along," she wrote, her words shaky but sincere. I hesitated before responding, aware that forgiveness required honesty, not just a polite acknowledgement. Finally, I called her. Hearing her voice after months of distance felt strange, almost alien, yet comforting. We spoke candidly, for the first time without Richard's shadow looming over the conversation. I told her about my struggles, my anger, and my fear, and she admitted hers. The tears came, not of sadness, but of mutual understanding. We weren't perfect, and maybe we never could be, but we could start again, honestly. Jennifer predictably resisted at first. A single phone call turned into a tense standoff, her sarcasm sharp, her hurt still wrapped in mockery. "You think you're better than me now?" she asked, voice tight. I didn't argue. Instead, I shared a piece of my journey, how hardship had forced me to learn resilience, empathy, and strategy, not cruelty. Slowly, she began to see that my success didn't diminish her, that she could forge her own path without being trapped in resentment. It took months, but a fragile truce emerged, built on boundaries, honesty, and the recognition that family doesn't always equal harmony, but it can mean understanding. In Seattle, my professional life continued to soar. Mitchell Analytics became a respected powerhouse in ad tech, not only for its technical innovations, but for its ethical leadership. I implemented programs for employee growth, mental health support, and mentorship. Every decision carried a piece of the lessons Richard had inadvertently taught me. Power without empathy destroys. Control without vision stagnates. The Mitchell Foundation also flourished. Startups we funded reported exponential growth, and I found myself mentoring young women from backgrounds similar to mine. Their drive, curiosity, and determination reminded me of the small-town girl who had once threaded needles in her mother's shop, believing in dreams bigger than her reality. Each success story was a validation, not of revenge, but of legacy, of creating space where talent and perseverance could thrive. One evening, as I sat overlooking Puget Sound, sipping coffee and reviewing expansion plans, I reflected on how far I had come. The anger I once carried toward Richard had softened into clarity. He remained a figure in my past, a reminder of obstacles I had overcome, but he no longer dictated my emotions. I had reclaimed my narrative, and in doing so, I had learned the true power of agency, the ability to define yourself on your own terms. Richard's occasional attempts to assert dominance now seemed almost pitiful. A forced greeting, a stiff apology for past slights, tiny gestures that reminded me not of his power, but of my triumph. Jennifer had found her own rhythm, pursuing her interests without seeking approval or comparison. And Susan, finally free from the paralysis of her past fears, had begun living a fuller, more confident life. The last piece of the puzzle was internal, forgiving myself for the times I had doubted, for the nights I had wondered if I was enough. Elizabeth Martin was more than the sum of her victories or defeats. She was resilience personified, a woman who had turned humiliation into strategy, anger into opportunity, and fear into liberation. I often returned in my mind to that Christmas party in Chicago, the moment Richard had pointed his finger, calling me a maid in front of everyone. At the time, it had felt like the end, a humiliation too large to bear. But that moment had sparked everything. The relentless pursuit of my own worth, the drive to build a life of integrity, the courage to confront injustice and reshape my destiny. Now, standing on the cusp of every new project, mentoring new talent, and guiding Mitchell Analytics and the Foundation toward the future, I understood the full circle of my journey. Success wasn't simply about wealth or revenge. It was about transforming pain into purpose and creating a world where respect and opportunity were available to anyone willing to work for them. Elizabeth Martin had become a name synonymous not just with achievement, but with perseverance, ethical leadership, and empowerment. And in every morning greeting, every handshake with an investor, every congratulatory email from a startup founder we had helped, I felt the quiet joy of someone who had claimed her life and refused to let the past define her. No one could take away the girl who had once been small and overlooked. She was still inside me, stronger, wiser, tempered by challenge, and ready to face any storm. And now, surrounded by a chosen family of friends, colleagues, and protégés, I knew this was only the beginning. My story was no longer about being underestimated. It was about leading, inspiring, and leaving a legacy that others could follow on their own terms. If someone out there feels trapped, overlooked, or underestimated, remember this: power doesn't come from dominance. It comes from resilience, courage, and the unyielding determination to define your own path. I am Elizabeth Martin, and I took the life that tried to define me and turned it into one I chose. And every day I wake up knowing I am exactly where I am meant to be. Years later, Elizabeth Martin's life had the appearance of perfection. Seattle's skyline framed her mornings, Mitchell Analytics was thriving, and the Mitchell Foundation had empowered dozens of first-generation entrepreneurs. But Elizabeth knew that the calm exterior was never the full story. Every victory carried shadows, decisions that haunted her, choices that had cost relationships, and the constant tension between ambition and morality. One rainy evening, Elizabeth sat in her office, staring at the city lights reflecting on the wet streets below. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. Curiosity piqued, she answered. "Elizabeth Martin?" a deep, unfamiliar voice asked. "You don't know me, but I've been following your moves closely. There's a situation, something from your past, that could undo everything." Her heart skipped. For a moment, memories of Richard's smirk, Jennifer's mocking laughter, and the early battles flashed across her mind. But she remained composed, her voice steady. "I'm listening." The caller continued, revealing a complex network of investors, old business partners, and a hidden clause in one of Phoenix Partners' acquisitions. Apparently, a key document from the Bennett Media deal had been manipulated by someone, possibly Richard or someone acting on his behalf, and if exposed publicly, it could trigger legal and financial consequences. Elizabeth's pulse quickened, but not with fear. This was strategy. Every step of her life had led to preparing for unexpected moves, for threats hidden in plain sight. She ended the call and immediately contacted Karen Walsh. Together, they pored over the documents, their meticulous analysis revealing a small but critical discrepancy. It wasn't catastrophic yet, but it could be if mishandled. This was the first time Elizabeth realized that victory was never final. Life had a way of presenting new challenges, tests that measured not just skill or intelligence, but character. She understood that power wasn't about dominating every room or humiliating every adversary. It was about navigating uncertainty, adapting, and making choices that aligned with one's values even under pressure. That night, as Elizabeth prepared for bed, she reflected on her journey. She had turned humiliation into triumph, transformed anger into opportunity, and reclaimed her worth from a world that had tried to define her as small and inconsequential. But the future reminded her that the story never truly ends. It only evolves. In the quiet darkness of her Seattle apartment, Elizabeth felt the familiar fire of determination. She had conquered one empire, but life, with its subtle twists and hidden threats, would always challenge her. And she was ready, not to dominate, not to seek revenge, but to rise, rebuild, and redefine every obstacle as a stepping stone. Elizabeth Martin smiled, her reflection in the window merging with the city lights. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, and no shadow from the past could eclipse the brilliance she had carved with her own hands. The night held suspense, mystery, and the faint promise of a new chapter, one that would test her morality, her wit, and her courage in ways she had yet to imagine. The story of the small-town girl turned tech powerhouse wasn't finished. It was only beginning, and this time Elizabeth Martin would write every line herself.